Hello and welcome to this third unit of a class of a company law. In this third unit, we are about to discuss the financial structure of companies. The financial structure of a company refers to the combination of equity capital and debt capital used by a company to finance its operations, growth, and other business activities. As we have discussed earlier, in the formation of a corporation and the objective of a corporation, the objective which is the best suitable objective is that the company is incorporated to earn a profit and a shareholder invest their money to earn the profit in the organization. So the financial structure of a company refers to the equity capital and the debt capital. It means the company eh, decisions on how to raise funds, the type of financial instruments should be used, the balance between equity and debt financing. So the provisions related to uh, the raising funds and how to raise funds is defined as a financial structure of a company. So the financial structure uh, in the company involves two components, that is equity capital and debt capital. Equity capital and debt capital. And these components influences the company's capitalization, risk profile and control structure. Equity capital. Equity capital is the capital raised through the issuance of shares to the owners or shareholders of the company. Means the capital which is raised by sharing the ownership of a company is called the equity capitals. In the equity capital, it represents the ownership in the company and is considered as permanent source of finance, and the one who is having claim on the company's profit is called equity shareholder. The type of equity capital can be the authorized share capital, which is the maximum amount of a capital a company is authorized to raise through the issuing shares. Type of equity capitals include the issued share capital, the actual amount of capital which has to be raised by the company through the issue of shares. Then the subscribed share capital, it is a portion of issued share capital which has been subscribed by the shareholders. Then there is a provision related to paid up capital, the portion of the subscribed capital that has been paid is called the paid up capital. Debt capital. Debt is opposite to the equity capital. Debt, as its definition states, the word meaning of the debt is taking loan from someone. So the debt capital in the concept of companies law, it is said that debt capital is the capital borrowed by the company, usually in the form of loan or the bonds or the debentures. Debt capital carries the obligation of repayment. It is essential in the debt that it should be repaid, typically with the interest. So this is called the debt capital. And the person who invest as a debt in the company by giving loan or by subscribing bonds or by buying debenture shares, then they are called the creditors and they have a priority claim over the equity shareholders. There are different types of debt capital in the financial structure of the company. The debt capital can be the long term debt, it can be in the form of debenture, there can be the short term debt, these are the debt for the period of 1 year. Then there is a convertible debt, the debt which can be converted into equity at a later date. There is a term capitalization of a company which need to be understood by the learners. The capitalization means the total value of a company, which means the outstanding shares and the long term debt, which means the equity and the debt capital both is capitalization of a company. There is a formula of the capitalization, and which means which says issued share, that is capital, plus debt capital is capitalization. And there are different types of capitalization, that is the authorized capital or the issued capital, paid up capital, and the market capitalization. Market capitalization is the term broadly used in recent developments. It is a price value of the share of a listed company, and the market capitalization can be calculated by multiplying share price and the number of issued shares. Sources of finance. What are the different sources of finance? The different sources of finance are internal source, which means retained earnings, means the profit which the company has earned through shareholders are reinvested. And the another sources of internal financing is the depreciation, which means the non-cash expense that adds back to the cash reserves. Other sources of finance are external sources, which can be equity financing, debt financing, venture capitalism. This is a famous trend in nowadays, venture capitalism. In this, financing provided by the investor for a high growth company. Then there is a provision regarding bank loans. There is a importance of financial structure in the company. So, what are the importance of raising debt or sharing ownership by equity shares? So, there is an importance of financial structure. One, it is to optimal capital mix. A well balanced mix of debt and equity ensures cost effective financing and minimizes financial risk. Another is the risk management. Another importance of financial structuring of a company is growth and expansion and the cost of capital. Now, when the company raises the money, how it is raises the money? What are its types of shares and what are the different classes? So, the share represents the ownership in a company. The shareholder is the owner of a company for that part and that for that sum which is his share value. In the company's share capital can be divided into different classes and types which has specific rights, privileges and obligations. And they are regarding the managing ownership and control and financial structure. So definition of share is defined in the Companies Act, in which the share are the units of ownership in a company, representing a portion of a company's capital. And the holder of a share is entitled to certain rights such as voting at the general meeting and receiving dividends. And as we discussed, there are two types of uh, shares, classes of shares, which are equity shares, which is sharing ownership to the shareholders, and preference shares. So the equity share represents the ownership, and the shareholders uh, give their voting rights and share the company's profit. So dividends, the key features are the voting rights, they get profit share, risk and return, both are uh, similar to the equity shareholders. Capital growth, equity shareholders benefit from the growth in the capital of a company. Then equity share. The ownership can be of two types, which is common shares. These common shares are the regular equity shares with the voting rights and different dividend rights. Bonus shares. In these, additional shares issued to existing shareholders based on the number of shares are already on. Preference shares. It is a class of preferential rights over equity rights in a terms of dividends and repayment of capital in the event of liquidation. They have a dividend preference, they have a capital preference, they have a limited voting rights. What are different type of preference shares? Preference shares, as its name shows, it is preferred to the equity share. So the preference shares can be of cumulative preference shares and non-cumulative preference shares. Cumulative means they the company is when the company is unable to pay dividends in the year, the unpaid dividends accumulate and must be paid in the future. And non-cumulative preference share means that in the year when the company do not pay the dividends, the those value those dividends are not accumulated, then these are non-cumulative preference shares. Convertible preference share and non-convertible preference shares. The main difference is that shares cannot be converted into equity shares. In the non-convertible preference shares, share will not be converted into equity shares, and in convertible preference shares, share can be converted into equity shares. Then there is redeemable reference shares and irredeemable preference shares. So which means the share can be brought back or redeemed by the company is redeemable, and when the share cannot be redeemed are usually issued for a duration is called irredeemable preference shares. So on the basis of type of a share capital, the different there are different status of a share capital. Authorized share capital is the maximum amount of capital which company is authorized to raise under the memorandum of association, and the issued share capital is the amount that the company has actually issued to the shareholder. Subscribed shareholder means the portion that has been subscribed or brought by the shareholders. Then the paid up share capital, which means the portion of the subscribed capital whose amount has been fully paid. So rights attached to shares are the different types of rights are attached to the shareholders. One is the voting rights. Equity shareholders typically have voting rights, while preference shareholders do not have unless the specific conditions apply. Dividend rights. Preference shareholders receive a fixed dividend before equity shareholders, and the equity shareholders receive dividends based on the company's profits. Another right which are attached to shares are right to share in surplus assets and transferability, which means the equity shares are freely transferable as a movable properties can be transferred from one person to another. Similarly, the equity share and the preference share can be converted into one another. Conversion of preference share into equity share. In some cases, preference share can be converted into equity shares, and this will be called the convertible preference shares. And if it is not, it cannot be converted, then it is non-convertible preference shares. So the conversion of shares are of two types, that is from equity shares to preference shares and preference shares to equity shares. And company may decide to convert these shares from one class to another, and it will be allowed by the articles of association. Another issues related to shares are The issuance of shares. Share may be issued through private placement, and when uh, shares are issued through public offerings, it is it should be issued with the proper prospectus under the provision of section 26, which is about the contents of the advertisement or the prospectus. Share transfer. Share can be transferred from one shareholder to another. And the buyback of shares. The company can buy back its own shares to reduce the circulation of shares. There is another point which need to be known is the issue of shares. Issue of shares at par. Issue of share at par means when the share is issued at the nominal value or its face value, which is typically set in the memorandum of association, is issue at par. At par means the same face value which has to be issued. If the face value of a share is rupees 10 and it has been issued in the issue price of rupees 10, and then it means here it has no premium or discount, then this is a share at par. What are the different legal provision for issue? So there are different legal provisions for issue of shares at par, that is in section 54, section 60 and 62 of the Companies Act. Generally the shares are issued at shares at par by the uh, approval of the board resolution and offered to existing shareholders, filling with the registrar of the companies, and then the allotment of shares will be done. What is premium and discount in the issuing of shares? So we will understand this with the help of example. When if the share has a face value of rupees 10 and it has been issued at rupees 15, then the gain of rupees 5 per share is called the premium of a share, and the premium will be mm, saved in the unique account number for the sole purpose of securities premium account. So it is has been legally uh, provisioned under section 52, section 55 and section 70 of the Companies Act. Discount means when the share is issued below the face value of a share. For example, if the face value of a share is rupees 10 and the issue price of a share is rupees 8, then the discount will be called of rupees 2. And the legal provisions for issuing shares at discount. Legal provisions for issuing shares at discount is provided in the section 53, section 53 of the Companies Act. Why the share are being issued in the discount? Share are issued at the discount to attract more investors. When the face value is more and the issue price is less, the investors are attracted for the better benefit. Then this is the advantage to attract investors. Employees benefit. For the benefit of the employee, the company issued shares at the discount to boost market presence. So the premium and shares are tools available to companies for raising capital, and each method has its own legal framework and implementation. So share capital alteration, uh, this is the term used under the section 61, 62 and 63, which means the share can be increased value of the share can be increased, reduced, or reorganized or reclassified for the share capital. When there is an increase in share capital or the reduction of a share capital, consolidation or subdivision and reclassification of shares, then it is an alteration. Reduction of a share capital means cancelling unpaid shares, buyback of shares, reduction of losses. And for this, there is a legal provision for the reduction of share capital, and that legal provision is the uh, resolution of a board and the approval from the court and filing with the registrar of the companies. So the share capital alteration is essential tool for managing companies' capital structure to meet financial needs, which covers losses or adjust to market conditions. And the last two topics which we have to read is the forfeiture and surrender of shares. These are the true process by which the company can regain shares from its shareholders. The forfeiture of the share means it is a process by which the company cancels or takes back shares from a shareholder because of the non-payment or because of the loss of the right. There are provision for forfeiture of share, and it can be forfeited under section 55 if the non-payment has if there is non-payment of calls, if the share has been partly paid, and there is a provision for under the article of association for forfeiture of shares. And to forfeiture the share, some process has to be followed. This is the process is to be followed because of the natural justice, and the process is to pay calls, failure to pay calls uh, by issuing resolution in the board to forfeit the shares, then notice to the uh, shareholder for the forfeiture of the share has to be issued, then the forfeiture resolution has to be finally passed, and then register of member has to be updated, and the name has to be shared with the registrar of the companies. So these are the provisions of the forfeiture of shares. So forfeiture and surrender. Uh, Surrender means the shareholder uh, voluntarily acts to give up their shares to the company, whereas in the forfeiture, the company on its own discretion forfeits the shares of a shareholder. And this legal provision regarding the surrender has been provided in the Companies Act of section 58 and in the article of association. There are advantages of forfeiture and surrender, and it advantages of the forfeiture is that it controls over non-paying shareholders, and there is again ability to reissue the share. And if in the surrender, the advantages of surrender is that it is a simpler process than forfeiture, and the shareholder want to relieve his obligation. So forfeiture and surrender are things, tools to manage the share capital and deal with shareholders who do not fulfill the financial obligation. So the issue of the share, types of the share capital, that is equity and preference share, and then surrender of the share, forfeiture of the share. These are the topics we have learnt in this module, and there is unit 4 we will discuss in the next module. Thank you. This was Pradyumna Sharma Assistant Professor in the Mewar University, Faculty of Legal Studies.